Hello, everyone. You're welcome to today's episode of Early Intervention Matters podcast. Thank you for joining in today, and we're happy to have you back. As you know, Early Intervention Matters podcast was set up about 5 years ago. We discuss different topics related to neurodiversity, and it's mainly to raise awareness, help inform families, carers, and professionals as well regarding different facets and presentations of neurodiversity, but also to help with supporting children and families and to share this episode with people you feel might benefit. So I've been so lucky to have lots of great guests, and I was extremely pleased to connect with Samantha, who is joining us today from the United States. I'm going to call on Samantha to introduce herself, but we're going to be talking about a very important topic, music, and how we can harness music in helping to support some of the challenges that we find across the way when supporting children with neurodiversity. So, Samantha, thank you so much for accepting our invite. I'm really pleased you could join us today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me on the show.
Good, good.
Yeah, so I am a board certified music therapist. I have been a music therapist for 15 years, and I work mainly with children and adults with developmental disabilities, neurodivergence, all of that. And then I also do parent consultation for parents raising neurodivergent kids because raising a neurodivergent kid is different than raising a neurotypical kid. And so I just kind of help with that. I have 3 kids of my own that are neurodivergent, and I have ADHD myself. So we're definitely in that world.
Thank you. It's always good to have people with lived experiences coming to share because sometimes it's difficult when people don't really know what others are going through. So thank you so much for sharing that. Yes, you talk about music therapy. Could you tell us what drew you into music therapy and how did your journey then evolve from that to working with neurodivergent children?
Yes. So music therapy, for those who don't know, is just using music to accomplish non-musical goals. We work on motor skills, academic skills, cognitive, social, emotional, sensory, all those different things using music. And when I was a junior in high school, I was like, I need to know what I'm studying in college. And I had played piano all my life. I had been in choirs, and I'm like, I want to use music, but I don't want to be a teacher. I don't want to be a performer. I don't know what else I can do. I wanted to use music functionally, not just for entertainment. And so then I randomly found music therapy on this college review website. And looking back on it, it's kind of funny because it did not describe music therapy very well at all, but it got me in the field. And that's all that matters. And then I've always been really interested in people with autism. It kind of started in high school where there was this kid who would come to dances that we had, like for church, and he would be by himself. And I would go try to talk to him, and people would say, oh, he's autistic. He doesn't want friends. He doesn't want to interact with people. He just comes to be by himself. And that really confused me. I just said, why would he bother coming here if he just wanted to be by himself? Like he could be by himself at home. And so that got me interested in the autistic population. And then I had a job in college where I was working one on one with a kid who had autism. And then I worked for a researcher, and that just got me into this population.
Wow, that's an interesting journey. Really
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, and like you said, a lot of people don't really know what music therapy, people just think, okay, music therapy is what do they do? I'm quite sure there are lots of people out there who would want to explore that as a career, but don't really know how to get into it or how to harness those skills. So thank you for explaining that. And what does typical music therapy session look like for a neurodivergent child? What typically happens in a session?
So we always start with a hello song, and that is usually like we can do it on drums, we can sing it a cappella. There was one kid that he did not like singing, And so we just drummed together and we had like kind of a back and forth conversation with drums to see how he was feeling that day. It's just a check in. And then depending on their goals, if they have motor skills goals, then we will use music while doing motor skills. Let's just say the kid has working on speech skills. So if he's younger, I'll just tell you about one of my clients because music therapy can look so different for so many different people. So he's working on speech skills and motor skills. So we sing hello and then we drum for a few minutes using a metronome because that gets the brain, it's kind of a warm up for the brain. And then I will sing books to him and he'll sing it with me. He doesn't sing the words right now, but he sings do, 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 or B sounds. When I started working with him, he was not making any sounds. And so the goal is for him to hum the melody to the book and then to sing what he's singing now and then to sing the words and then be able to say the words without the use of music. And so that's what we're doing there. And then we play games using motor movements. And so I count with the metronome and I count to 10 while we do like a different motor movement. So we might do jumping jacks or walking like a different animal or something like that. But we
Mhm.
use the metronome because it helps regulate the brain. And then we'll do different interventions like that. And then we end with a goodbye song or a goodbye activity just to kind of close out the session.
Oh, that's really interesting. And how you can use that with the language development. I think that's really interesting. So, they've talked about language, you've talked about motor development and how you pace that and just help the child in a more relaxed way. Because the
Yeah.
child won't be feeling that they're doing any active therapy, but they are actually having therapy.
Yeah, my goal as a therapist is to not make them feel like they're in therapy.
Yes.
So, we use games, we use songs,
Mm,
and it's very child-led.
mm,
So, I'll ask the kid, "Hey, what do you wanna work on?" And if they want to read a book, then we're going to sing the book and work on the language development. It's my
mm.
job to see what they wanna do and then make that into an intervention that can work on their goals. It's not their job to fit into what I plan, is what I always say.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Good, wonderful. So, again, for our listeners who don't really know how music therapy works, do you want to explain a bit more about how the underlying way in which it works? Because obviously there's science behind it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, music accesses more of the brain than any other stimulus at one time. And so, I like to use the example of Gabby Gifford. She was a
Yeah.
congresswoman in Arizona who had a traumatic brain injury, and her language center was disrupted, like obliterated kind of.
Mm,
And so she credits music therapy. In addition, she had physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, but the music therapist came in and was able to access a different part of her brain. And that made new neural connections in her brain so that she
mm,
was able to speak again because the music was able to access the part of her brain that wasn't affected, and then
mm,
it was able to make new networks so that she could get the function back that she needed. And so that's
mm,
kind of how it works. So another example is I was working with a kid who had hydrocephalus and he could not understand spoken questions. And so I worked with a speech therapist. I co-treated with her and I sang the questions and then he would answer them. And she gave me the questions to sing to him. They were like, the W questions, like what, who, those kinds of things. And we slowly backed off the music. And as his brain was making those new connections, he was able to understand just the spoken questions. And we got to the point where we didn't need the music at all.
oh, wow, that's really good.
Yeah.
I'm learning a lot because when we say, oh, he needs music therapy, it's good to understand the basis and the background and how this works because it just helps people to understand that better. And so you've shared that you have experience of ADHD and OCD. Has that shaped how you practiced, as a therapist? Has that had any influence on the way you approach things with the children?
I think it's given me more of an understanding of where they're coming from. So if they're not able to sit still, for example, I know that's a very stereotypical thing in ADHD, but what sensory things do we need to do with them to make it so they're able to concentrate on
Mm,
maybe a harder task? And so we'll do different sensory things with music to get them ready for the deep work that we do if we're doing deep work that day. Or we'll just practice coping skills, for example. So a lot of people with ADHD have it's almost like bipolar, but it's not bipolar disorder, but they have fluctuating moods and
yeah.
emotions. And so helping kids, I can understand that. I can understand the feeling. And so then I can help kids have better coping skills to kind of combat those different emotions that they have. And I think it
Mm,
helps because if you don't experience that yourself, it's kind of hard to
to
relate to
understand,
a
yeah,
kid who is having those things.
yeah. And so coming to emotional regulation, so do you get lots of children referred for emotional regulation challenges?
I would say the majority of my clients are working on some type of emotional regulation goal. And
Mm,
we talk a lot about emotions. We write songs about emotions and we play instruments and it also helps music because a lot of kids with autism are concrete thinkers. And
mm,
so we're working on flexible thinking in addition to the emotions. So I'll tell them, hey, play this instrument in a happy way. And they're like, or I'll say, play it like it's happy. And they'll say, music, like instruments can't be happy. They're not alive. And I say, well, just imagine that it was happy. What would it sound like? And so different things like that. So we're working on the concrete language, while also working on the emotion and helping them
mm,
understand what it feels like in their body to
mm.
feel that emotion.
Yeah, it's a very typical response you will get from the kid. Yeah, good. So, and so do you typically find like a child who's struggling with that regulation at school? Do you typically find that going through that process does help with the
Yeah,
image?
so if you can remember things better with songs. I mean, look
Yeah,
how we learn the ABCs and
yeah.
all this other stuff. And so if we can teach them a song, so when let's say they get really frustrated or angry, and then we teach them a song to calm down that takes them through steps to calm down, then they can
Mm,
sing that song to themselves or out loud and just go through the steps of calming down.
mm,
Or they can say, "Hey, I need a break to go drum for a minute." And
mm.
then they can go get their frustration or aggression out on a drum instead of having a meltdown in the classroom.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have sometimes in my clinic when children come in, the ones with autism, a lot of them, some of them may have no words at all, but they could come in and start singing and singing these words really well to a song, or and they would repeat the things and say, but verbally their language is still behind. So it's always very fascinating about the way they can sing and enjoy the music, and that tends to calm them down when they're doing that. So,
Yeah.
and we do have a lot of schools here in the UK. Some of the schools have access to bringing music therapy into into the school, or art therapies. Some of them have those abilities. So sometimes they have that as a first point to send the children to before they go on. So it's quite lovely for parents to understand, because I think it's not often that they get to understand the basis behind the therapy that they're asking. Sometimes they think, oh, the child is just going there to spend some time and play some instruments and things, but actually understanding the benefits of this on them. So with families, are there some practical music-based strategies that parents can use during difficult times? Because obviously, when they come and see you, they're coming for a session. But what kind of strategies do you tend to ask parents to continue with when? when they're
Yeah.
at home.
Yeah. So if this is kind of a funny one, but if your kid is very destructive when they get frustrated or aggressive or anything like that, I do drum talk where you give your kid a drum and then you have a drum and you just have a conversation back and forth using the drum. But you imitate or you match the energy of what your child is doing. So if they are banging really, really hard on the drum, then you repeat that back to them. You don't do exactly what they're doing, but you have the same energy. And then as they calm down, you can also calm it down and just kind of match what they're doing. And that helps them like get the energy out. It also helps them hear, like, when someone says something, you're like, I understand what you're saying. I can hear what you're saying. So it helps them
Yeah.
feel heard and all of that. So that's something that you can do. There's also, I really like if a kid is having a hard time getting their feelings out, there are songs that you can write using kind of like Mad Libs where you just fill in the
Yeah.
blanks. And you can Google Mad Lib songs and it will come up. And then they can
Mm.
write a song about how they're feeling or about anything else, and you can just put in words, and you can make it fun and
Mm.
silly, or you can do it more serious. So if you wanna make it fun and silly, then you just say, "Okay, I need an adjective, I need an adverb, I need a verb, I need a noun," and you just fill in, and kids think that is so funny. And then or you can do it where it's like, "Okay, this song is gonna be about this subject. Let's make it about this. Let's make it kind of a serious song," and then you can write more and
Yeah.
have it more connected. The other thing that I love doing is there's this thing called the ISO principle, where if you're sad, you don't want to just listen to happy music to make you feel better. You
Yeah.
have to move through the emotion. And so what you do is you listen to sad music first, and then you slowly move toward happy music, and that will help you move through the emotion, really feel the emotion, and then move through it, and then be able to stay in a happier state.
Mm.
Because if you just start listening to happy music, it's gonna kinda jolt your body, and you're not gonna be able to move through that sad emotion, or if you're mad or angry or whatever. This also goes for if your kid they found that people who are neurodivergent typically run at a higher rate than people who are neurotypical. So if your kid is really hyper and you need them to calm down, or they're just, like going all over the place and you need them to calm down, put on music that's faster, has a faster beat. So maybe it's like at 140 beats per minute. And then you slowly bring the music down to slower songs, and that will help their bodies relax and come down, where if you just started playing slow music, they wouldn't be able to regulate to that.
Yeah.
And so you want to start at a higher rate and then come down to a lower rate, and that will get their
Mm.
bodies to calm down. That will help them calm down, be in a more regulated state, and then be able to do whatever they need to be doing.
This is really interesting because the natural tendency is that, if they're going at a fast rate, you want to quickly bring them down. And that's what some family parents would do is really want to quickly calm down that state. So it's interesting that, you're working through it with them. I find that really fascinating and really interesting.
Yeah, I think it's so cool how it works.
It is, it is. So it's almost like an instructive language. You're telling the child, you're sending a message to the child.
Yeah, and a lot of kids don't respond well. So if you just went up to your kid and they were, kind of hyperactive, not calming down, and just say, "You need to calm down. You need to stop what you're doing." They're not going to react well to that. But if you put on some music and say, "Let's dance to this," then they're gonna start dancing, having fun. I always say, like, what can you do that's play-based, and use less words, more music, more play, and that's gonna
Yeah,
help your child get to the state that they need to be at faster than if you just said, "Well, you need to stop crying," if they're sad or whatever, like, "You need to stop
yeah,
crying. Stop that right now." Well, how can we do that musically and
Yeah.
really help their bodies move through the emotions that they're feeling rather than just saying, stop that right now.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think this is really interesting because when we look at all the, obviously after the assessment and diagnosis, and you giving parents strategies about how to manage, this is one thing that, should be featuring in the strategies, but doesn't really feature. There's a lot of word-based strategies and things, and it's interesting that music therapy does not feature. Using music, parents using music to help that situation does not feature as much as it should. So I'm really pleased that we are doing this session because I think this is something that families can tap into, can look at how they can use music as part of trying to regulate their child in different situations. Because we look at all the strategies, I look at what we give to the parents in the clinic, I look at all the advice we give when they're going through that, disruptive and, period, and look at what the mental health team do. We don't really emphasize the role of music as part of that therapeutics. So I thank you so much for sharing that because that's really good information. And do you think it works for most children?
Think you definitely have to figure out what music your kid likes.
Yes, yeah.
So if you're going to turn on music that your kid doesn't like, it's not going to work well. But if you find the
Mm,
music that they do like, then I think it does work for most kids. Yeah.
that's really good. Yeah. So what are the challenges that you tend to have when you're doing therapy and with music therapy? Are there any particular challenges that you have?
Yeah, I would say sometimes kids just don't want to do music. And
Yeah.
so I kind of feel guilty, like, oh, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do. But then
Mm,
my internship director was like, you can still do music therapy without just using music. So
mm,
maybe that day they just need to play a game and that's okay. And
mm,
the only music that we use is counting. So like the memory game that I do, it just has movement cards and we play memory with the movement cards. And when we get a match, then we do that movement. The only music in that game is I'm counting to a song.
mm,
And that's okay because that's what the kid needs that day. And so I'd
mm.
say that's the biggest challenge is just sometimes kids don't want to use music. And I'm like, oh, what do I do? Like, but I'm a music therapist, but you don't have to use music 24/7 in
Yeah.
your sessions.
So you
That was a
can.
really good reminder for me. Yeah.
So, and as a parent yourself, obviously there are challenges when you're, with children who are neurodivergent. What do you feel is the role of positive discipline when providing that neurodiversity affirming care to children?
Yeah. I would say to always look at behavior as communication. So, like, I just had a podcast interview with someone, and she said, everybody wants the gold star. I don't think kids do things like me personally, well, and research says that kids don't do things just to do things. They want you to be happy. They want to be happy. They're not doing things just to make you mad. And so if your kid is doing something that looks defiant, just for the
Mm,
sake of defiance, always look deeper and be like, are they having a sensory need? Are they overstimulated? Are they overwhelmed? Like, whatever that looks like. Are they too hot? Are they too cold? Like, if your kid has a meltdown every time you go into a particular store, what is it about that store when you walk in that's making
mm,
them have a meltdown? Because I don't think they think to themselves, oh, I'm going to make my mom mad right now to make her life difficult. That's not what they're thinking. They're thinking, oh, the lights are flickering or the lights are too bright or there's too many people in the store or I'm
it's so
cold or I'm
noisy.
hot or it's noisy or whatever. And so, and then not punishing them for having a need, I think is the basis of positive parenting,
Mm,
is you really wanna come at it like, "Okay, you're having this negative behavior. What can we do so that you don't feel like
mm,
you have to have that behavior?"
that's true. And most parents want to put in structure and maintain that structure. But what do you think about how they balance structure and sometimes being flexible? What would be an advice to parents?
Yeah, I think that structure is super important. A lot of kids who are neurodivergent thrive on structure, but we ask kids to be flexible all the time. We say,
Mm,
this is what we're going to do, but something might change. And so, for example, if you have a strict bedtime routine, and let's say your kid is trying to push boundaries or they're just not feeling a shower that night, are you going to ruin their relationship over demanding that they have a shower? Or are you gonna be flexible and be like, "Oh, maybe tonight they don't have to take a shower, but we're still gonna get in bed on time because I value their sleep."
mm,
Or, something like that. Or when they're eating dinner, so we have a rule in our house, you have to at least, like, smell it or take a small, like, my kids call it a nibble.
mm,
But if I know that my kid doesn't like a food already that they've tried, am I going to force them to eat that
yeah.
food because it's expected that they try it? Or I usually just say, "Okay, you don't have to eat it. I'm not making a separate meal though. My kids are old enough that they can get their own food."
Mm,
So I just think it's important to be flexible, definitely have that structure. I'm not talking about being a permissive parent and
yeah.
letting like letting whatever happen happen. But if you're seeing that your kid is struggling with something that day and they're not able to
Mm,
do the thing that they normally do,
mm.
it's not gonna ruin your parenting, it's not gonna ruin your kid if you don't do it that one day.
Absolutely. Yes. And I think that's the message because sometimes parents think if you break that structure and then you get a more distressed child who is having more battles because,
Yeah,
for them, I think you're very right. We need to understand, are you going to ruin the whole day and subsequent days of the week for the child because of that one incident? Yeah.
yeah.
Uh, that's and just coming to schools, do you do lots of work with schools?
I do not do a lot of work with schools right now. I have been recommended to schools, but the school in my area is very resistant to me helping them in any way.
Really?
So, in the United States, it is you have to be able to do at least an assessment for music therapy on an individual education plan or an IEP. And unless the parents fight for that, then the school will just say, "Oh, we can't do that." And so it's very, very hard. Parents are already fighting for so much on IEPs
Mm,
that they just don't have it in them to also fight for music therapy. But
okay.
there are music therapists in schools across the country. Idaho is not one of those places, but I'm hoping that eventually we can get it in schools.
Okay. So
Yeah.
it has to be named on the IEP before they
Yeah.
get it.
Yes.
Okay. Right. So do you have, because sometimes in schools here in the United Kingdom, the schools can have, a buy-in. The schools buy in the psychologist or the therapist, musical art therapist. They have certain sessions which they agree with them, and then they then send that to any child they feel might benefit from it. Then they allocate that to the child.
That would be
So
awesome. We
yeah,
don't do
because I
that.
think it would be great and that's how some parents have been able to get that for their child. So the school might say, okay, you get about several sessions of, you know, music therapy, and the music therapist will work with the child at the
Okay.
school. So that would be really good. What advice would you give to teachers about understanding the use of rhythm, routine, or sound in the classroom? Is there something you can advise teachers about?
Yeah, I would say use rhythm, use music in your classrooms as much as possible.
Mm,
So if they're having, like I said, if the class is, high energy, you can use music to bring that energy down as a group.
mm,
If you're trying to get their attention, maybe start doing clapping, just start clapping different rhythms. Or you can there's this song called Can You Do What I Do?
Mm,
And you say, Can you do what I do? And then you do a rhythm. And then they say, We can do what you do. And then they do a rhythm. And so that's an easy attention getter. Just if the class is kind of out of control, you can just start doing that.
mm,
Yeah, and just use the ISO principle in the class. So just depending on their energy level, like I said before, you can kind of change
yeah,
their energy level based on the music that you're using.
that's great. So there are simple things which teachers can do in the classrooms
Yeah.
to just help, because sometimes the class can go quite busy and it's almost like a catch on. One child starts, another one joins in. And sometimes the classroom can be difficult for teachers to bring down. I think there was it this week or last week? So a parent was telling me, giving me a feedback on their child. And one of the things that happened was the child was now in the class. There was a very young teacher who was struggling to manage the classroom, and things got so difficult that the teacher became distressed because she just couldn't support the class and get the children calm.
Yeah.
So she was really struggling. And I thought, wow, what advice could in such situations, music definitely is something they should look at, because what you can't do with your words, you can actually get them more attentive and coming down to the
Yeah.
music. Okay. So how has your experience been? Obviously, with you being, having neurodiversity, has that, in terms of your role, your dual role as a clinician, as a therapist, and a parent, how have you found that?
I have had to learn my own coping skills, definitely as a parent. And because of that, the emotional roller coaster kind of that comes with ADHD, I can go from perfectly calm to super angry really fast. And so I've had to learn my own coping skills to be like, okay, we're going to calm down. We're going to reevaluate the situation. And even when I'm in like my music therapy sessions, sometimes kids will do things like the other day I got hit in the face
Wow.
and it was really weird because that client, like, never does stuff like that, but she hit me right on the nose, and so
Wow.
you kind of have to, like I was really surprised, and I just had to
Yeah.
come back and just, use coping skills to react to that situation, but I think it gives me a better understanding of where my clients are coming from, where my kids are coming from, to better understand their behavior and maybe not judge them so much because I completely understand where they're coming from because 'cause I've
Coming
been
from.
in their
Yeah.
shoes. So,
Yeah. Good. And what do you wish professionals better understood about families? Sometimes professionals who haven't had that lived experience, it can sometimes be difficult.
yeah, I actually had a mom before I had kids. I was doing music therapy, and I said something to her, and she said, "I appreciate what you're saying, but you have no idea what my life is like. You have no idea what it's like to be a mom. You have no idea what it's like to raise kids with disabilities." And at first I was like, oh, how dare you? I know what I'm saying. I have read the research. I know what I'm talking about. But then I had kids and I had kids with disabilities and I completely understand where she was coming from now because it's hard to trust professionals who don't know what it's like to raise
Mm,
kids with these different things. And so my kids have therapists who don't have kids, and it is kind of harder for me, like, I feel very judged by them. They're like, "Well, why can't you do this?" And so I would just
mm,
say to professionals, if you're not living this life, roll back the judgment, roll back what you think parents should be doing because parents are doing their best. I guarantee you the majority of parents are doing their best with what they have.
mm,
So just be aware. I know that a lot of professionals probably think they're not being judgmental, but
mm.
just be aware of how your words are sounding when you're talking to parents.
Mm,
Because I've had a lot of parents come to me and say, "I feel so judged by this professional, that professional, whatever." And they're like, "They're expecting me to do this when I'm
mm,
just doing my best and that it's never good enough for them."
mm.
And I don't think that's what professionals are meaning to give off, but they sometimes can sound very judgmental of what parents are doing.
It is, and I completely agree with you. And I think sometimes I've experienced this when we sit in multidisciplinary meetings and, we are talking about a particular child, and it's so easy because people are just saying snippets of behaviors and saying snippets without actually realizing what it is when you have to be with the child going through this processes and if you're not getting enough support. So one of the situations I met with a child and I just, I just felt for the parent. I felt for the parent. I felt for the sibling because the sibling is sometimes forgotten and you almost do not realize what the parent is trying to struggle with, supporting the neurodiverse child, but at the same time giving attention to the neurotypical child and making sure they're not missing out on things. So I completely agree with you. Professionals need to be very sensitive. We can't sometimes with the pressure of work that we have just feel this parent is not getting on with this. They should be doing this, and why are they not doing that? So yes, thank you for reminding us about that. It's very important. And what are the biggest misconceptions about music therapy? Because I've learned a lot from you today. But there are lots of people who don't understand that. What are the biggest misconceptions?
Most people think that I just play, classical music and the kid listens to it and then they just become so calm and that's all I do. And that is definitely not what I do. I think I've played they always say Beethoven. They're like, "You must play Beethoven." I was like, "First of all, Beethoven is not particularly relaxing, but I don't ever use, like, that type of music, and that's fine." Like, I think I've used it, like, once.
Mm,
But I am very functional when it comes to using music. There is a reason why I'm
mm,
using the music that I'm using. There's a reason why I'm doing what I'm doing with the music, and it's not just all for relaxation. I use different types of music. So people will be like, "Well, what type of music is the best to use for that? What type of music is the best to use for this issue?" And I'm like, "Whatever music the person likes." If they like rock and roll, then we're gonna use rock and roll music. If they like country music, then we're gonna use country music. It's whatever the person likes. A lot of people think there is just one type of music for one issue.
mm.
That is not true at all.
Yeah, yeah. That's so important because I was just about to ask that because some families might think, okay, this is what is happening now. And let's use this. So it
Yeah.
doesn't work like that. It's what the person, you know, likes that you're going to use. So that's really important. And are there barriers that families face in accepting or accessing the therapy? I mean, you've
Yeah.
mentioned one of it is the cost.
Yes. So private insurance, at least in my state, does not cover music therapy. The only way to get music therapy funded, other than just paying out of pocket yourself, is through Medicaid, but you have to be on a special waiver within a special waiver to get the funding for music therapy.
Mm,
So it's very difficult and only like a very small percentage of kids even get on that waiver. And so it's really hard to access music therapy unless you have the means to just pay for it
mm.
yourself. There's not a lot of funding options.
So where do majority of your clients come from?
Most of them come from Medicaid. So I'm on a list on Medicaid. And if they get on that waiver within the waiver, then they can access music therapy.
Okay. And is it a long wait to see you?
Right now, I have 130 kids on my wait list.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of music therapists in the area. And so it's really difficult to get in to see a music therapist. I'm trying to bring them to this area, but
Yeah.
there's just not enough music therapists in the area to cover all the kids and adults who could use music therapy.
Okay. And you work with adults as well.
Yep. Yep.
And how long does a typical session last?
Usually sessions, I have 30-minute sessions, 45-minute or 60-minute sessions available. And usually, like, for younger kids, we'll do 30 minutes, and then it just goes up from there depending on what the person wants, what's best for them, what they can handle, that kind of stuff.
And do you have like a minimum number of sessions that you feel?
It just depends. So one time I did 3 sessions in a week with this family and just gave them different things they can do at home, and they went on their way. Other people, I've worked with them for 15 years.
Yeah.
So it just depends on what the person needs and what their
Mm.
goals are. I would say it is a longer process. So typically when people come to music therapy, they are in music therapy for at least a year or so,
Okay.
but you can do less than that.
And do you only do face-to-face assessments?
No, we do remote. I would say the majority of our sessions are in person, but we can do remote. It just depends on if the kid or adult can handle that or if they can pay attention to that and what they're working on. Yeah.
And so for our audience, which child would you say would benefit from music therapy? What was the profile of children that would benefit from it?
Music therapists work with a wide range, so that's a really hard question. I would say, because
Mm,
even music therapists will even work with people who are deaf, and music
mm,
therapy can help them, which a lot of people are surprised by because they're like, well, they can't hear the music. What would you do? But the vibrations and different things like that can really help them. And so I typically work with people who have developmental disabilities. They are working on some kind of goal related to speech or language development, motor skills, cognitive skills, social emotional. And then if they're interested in therapy, I'm not going to force a kid to do therapy. And so
mm,
if they're really resistant, then we can try it, but
mm,
I have had a few kids who we just didn't click, and so we stopped therapy. If they're not into it, I think it does more damage to go every week and say, "You're going to participate in this?"
mm.
And so, yeah, they have to be willing to participate in it.
Great. And so in the ideal world, having listened to everything you've said, we would really love music therapy to be part of. In fact, I've listened to this episode, and just listening to our discussions, I'm looking at it and saying, I know many children that would benefit from this. I know many children who are going through real challenging behavior that could actually do with having music therapy as part of their program. So where do you see music therapy fitting into mainstream neurodevelopmental care? So in the next 5 to 10 years, what would be your advice?
Yeah, I would love to see music therapy in schools, working with the autism specialists in schools to help kids with coping skills, or I've seen amazing things happen with motor and speech skills. So just having a music therapist to co-treat with the speech therapist or co-treat with an occupational therapist or physical therapist. It was said to me that music therapy is today where occupational therapy was like 25 years ago. And
Right.
so I'm hoping that in the next little bit that music therapy can be as prevalent as
Yeah.
occupational therapy. It can be paid for like occupational therapy is, that we get more research
Yeah.
and it can just be as valued as
Yeah.
other therapies. Yeah.
And I agree with you. I think having been a neurodevelopmental pediatrician for, over 20 years, just thinking about the profile of children I've been seeing and the fact that, some children just find it so distressing with the whole environment, the school environment. And there are many school refusers, children who can't go to school because they just can't access the environment. But just looking at what therapy options are available to them and how schools could use that as part of settling them down and just helping them to have that access. I think there's huge benefits that we're not tapping into. But
Yeah.
I'm really pleased that you've been able to share this information with us. So where can people find you if they want to know and learn more about you or contact you? Do you ever have people from outside the US?
Yeah, yeah. So I can help people with parent consulting. I can't do music therapy outside the US, but I can, if they're interested in parent consulting, and they can just go to boisemusictherapycompany.com, or I have a podcast called Every Brain is Different, and you can listen to that to get resources too.
Right. So we will add those resources to the podcast when it is released, and where
Awesome.
people can find you and can connect with you. Because I think you're doing great and awesome work.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Well, thank you so much, Samantha. It's been a great episode. It's been an eye opener for me,
Yeah.
learning so much about music therapy because it's one of those, we say to, yes, schools, can you help get music therapy or art therapy? But just having a better understanding about how the therapy works and the value and the fact that it should actually be up there with part of our recommendations, and there should be more access to this music therapy because it's a gentle therapy. It's something that the
Mhm.
child doesn't feel that they're being forced to participate in, so they're just doing it naturally without actually knowing that they're in therapy sessions, and which is what we want for a lot of the children we see, to just remove that, define episode. I think it's great. And I, just like you, I would love to see music therapy forming a prime part. I'm certainly going to promote it from my end and look at
Yeah.
how people we can access that even more. But thank you so much for sharing this valuable knowledge with us. Is there any one last thing you would want to say to parents out there?
I would just say be creative in how you use music. And if your kid is maybe having maladaptive behavior or negative behaviors, just look for the communication behind the behavior before punishing them, or just leave punishment out of it. And, so find out what they're really communicating.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
love the message to professionals is, we're not living the lives that the families are living every day. So we should be sensitive to them. And also not be judgmental because they're actually going through a lot. Thank you for that reminder. And thank you so much for sharing this.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
me on.
Thank you.